Hi everyone, my name is Rona. I work at University of Dundee Disability Services, and my focus is particularly on assistive technology. The title of this presentation is Generative AI, the Future of Assistive Technology, which I'll try to cover to an extent, but basically I'm going to discuss the Generative AI training sessions that we ran within our Disability Services Department during the academic year of 2024-2025. So firstly, I'll look at the MSc research project that I did. So I initially did this as part of my MSc, which I finished at the start of this year. So I'll discuss the findings that I got from that project, and then I'll discuss the further training sessions that I did in March of this year and some conclusions that I kind of gathered from the process of delivering sessions, some of the informal results that I kind of also got from students, as well as the formal stuff that came through from the questionnaires and stuff that I distributed. So hopefully there'll be something of interest to everyone here, never mind what kind of role that you have, just to see kind of how we've tried to support students with this and tried to look at generative AI training in a responsible way. So firstly, like I said, I'll cover the research project, how that was delivered and the focus of that and some of the findings that came through. So the aim of the research project in particular was to identify disabled student perspectives on the use of Microsoft CoPilot as a tool for exam revision. So in particular, I was focused on investigating the extent to which disabled students are using generative AI. So before the training sessions, how often are they using it? To develop prompt training designed to enhance their confidence to use it for academic support purposes, and also to investigate their perceptions of Microsoft CoPilot as a tool for exam revision. We focus particularly on Microsoft CoPilot because for more data security reasons, for it more protected when students sign in account, their data is more secure. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on, but the focus was on using Microsoft CoPilot, but there was some mention of other generative AI tools, so we know that others exist and students might already be using them or be aware of them. So I wanted to do this project because I'm aware that there's barriers to students accessing assistive technology at the university. So it might be due to difficulties with accessing disabled students' allowance for funding to access the assistive technology because maybe they don't have an official diagnosis of a disability, because there's long waiting lists for autism diagnoses, ADHD diagnoses, that kind of thing. There might be kind of stigma associated. They might not want to come and speak about things that are quite personal or difficult to talk about. There might be difficulties with they might not be eligible for certain funding due to DSA, for example, disabled students' allowances only for students from the UK, so they might not be able to access that. So the whole range of reasons why there's lots of great assistive technology that exists that I'm sure a lot of you know of, but a lot of it has costs associated with them. So not all students can access them, or there might be difficulties with that, which are difficult to get around sometimes. So that's part of the reason, and also in general, more general difficulties for some students in accessing disability support due to kind of reasons that I mentioned with stigma and things as well. And also in particular, the fact that a lot of disabled students can have challenges associated with exam revision. For a lot of disabilities, mean that it can be more difficult for a disabled student to revise as opposed to other students. So examples would be due to kind of memory difficulties and processing information associated with like dyslexia. It could be ADHD, difficulties with kind of study motivation, procrastination, time management. Also medical conditions or mental health difficulties can affect kind of energy levels. They can affect feeling overwhelmed with the revision we've got to do, which can kind of be a barrier to even getting started. So that's why I was focusing particularly on disabled students, also because that's kind of my remit in my job. But we're also, I guess, what I was delivering potentially could have been beneficial to the general student cohort, but I was focusing on the disabled student body within this. So the methodology for the research project was that I delivered a 45-minute group prompt training session for students. So students had to self-declare as disabled. They had to have a course that did exams. They had to be over 18 due to, at that time, Microsoft CoPilot's like parental control restrictions. But yeah, they didn't need to be associated with disability services or anything. We just wanted to. I just had to have those restrictions due to the focus of my research and what I was trying to find. So some of the sessions were delivered online via Microsoft Teams, and some were delivered in person, and there were up to 6 students in each session, which actually worked really nicely. It was quite a small, informal group, so students felt that they could share quite openly, but also, and they could kind of bounce some ideas off each other and stuff as well, which was quite nice. And then afterwards, they completed an online survey. So obviously linked to the objectives that I had, I wanted to find out about their confidence to use it pre and post training. I wanted to find out about their fears about using generative AI at university, and particularly their fears about using it for revision. And I wanted to ask about how they'd used it in the past, if they'd used it before at all, and if they had, which tools, how frequent. So that was the plan. It's just a photo of the retraining session that we had. So in particular, what we covered in the training session was, it was designed as quite a basic overview, because I wanted to ensure any students could come if they had no knowledge of it whatsoever, they could still come and participate. And just to kind of get them up to that level where they had a little bit more confidence to use it, so then they could go off to use it for their own course and use it in other ways that I'd explain during the sessions. So I started just by explaining what is generative AI, and like the difference between that and artificial intelligence that's existed for a while. So it looks like just briefly some tools that exist, some types of AI that exists, kind of like image generation, text to text, video generators, etc. But the focus of mine was on text to text generation within CoPilot. We looked at how to write AI prompts. So we used a framework. It was a Clear framework. It was what I used particularly last year to look at adding a context, look at the limitations, such as in bullet points and using formal language. An example, which would be an example of like what you wanted it to generate. The actions just being specific in what you wanted from the tool, and also refining, so just being prepared to iterate if it didn't create exactly what we were looking for. We then also looked at some example prompts for exam revision. So we looked at some quite simple examples of using it for quiz generation, using it for terminology list, then also some other examples of asking it to take on a role to simulate a kind of patient interaction, like doctor-patient interaction, or to simulate as if it was a 16-year-old and you'd be able to kind of act as a teacher to see how well you understood the content and stuff like that. And we looked at limitations of generative AI. So the main thing we did look at was the data security side, reasons which I'll explain, but also we looked at other limitations of the technology, particularly also the academic integrity side, because students were very concerned about being accused of plagiarism and things around using this. So we did cover that along with the university's guidance on academic integrity in relation to the use of generative AI. And then within the survey, as I mentioned, there were questions related to the prior use of generative AI, the impact of the training on their competence to use it. And also I asked some details just about their kind of tech competence, about their which generation they were in their age profile, I suppose, and also which disabilities they had, just to see if there was any kind of link there between if that seemed to impact their likelihood to use it, or how their training had made a difference to their confidence to using them. So so I did come up with a stumbling block at a part of the process where, in regards to data security of using CoPilot during the actual sessions. So I was asked by our internal data governance team to complete an initial data risk assessment for the use of Microsoft CoPilot. We're using the free version of CoPilot. And the idea was that students would be allowed to use CoPilot during the sessions just to try out the prompts that I was explaining. But unfortunately, there were concerns internally about about students using it in the session for security reasons. And it came out that there was a concern particular about data grounding, which is where Microsoft CoPilot collects additional data in addition to the prompt in order to help it respond to the prompt that someone adds in. So even if the prompt itself seems fairly okay, and they're just asking it to create a quiz or whatever about something related to their course, and there was concerns that other data might be collected that might be sensitive. So basically, it came out that I was asked to amend the project and not allow students to use CoPilot during the session. So I was okay to demonstrate it, but they didn't use it independently during the session, although obviously when they went home, they would be able to. And that actually ended up working fine due to the small group sessions and we were able to see it on the big screen. So it wasn't a major limitation in that sense, but obviously it did prompt some concerns about that. So on to the results. The first question was obviously in relation to disabled student use of generative AI. So there was, interestingly, a wide range of reported use pre-training, with the particular interesting part being the 41% reported that they hadn't used it before the training. But yet there was 31% that used it at least once a week. So quite a wide disparity. Potentially, this is just obviously my opinion, but potentially it's around the fact that there is limited training for students. So some go all in and use it all the time, and others maybe are fearful of it, or they're not interested in it, or whatever it might be. And so that might result in being quite a wide variety. So we might assume that students, especially young students, they all know lots about ChatGPT, etc., but that might not necessarily be the case. And also, there was interestingly no correlation identified between tech proficiency and prior use. Some students said they were really tech proficient, but yet didn't know much about GenAI, and also the opposite was true as well. Some students not being confident with technology in general, but then actually found that they were using GenAI quite a lot and they're quite good at it. So that was an interesting result that came through. The second part was around their confidence to use generative AI pre and post training. So 90% said that they were much more confident to use generative AI post training, and 96% probably or definitely would use GenAI to support the revision after the training, which is quite a positive thing. And in general, anecdotally, students were they were happy to be there, and they were quite positive about the fact they had the opportunity to learn more about it. So it seemed as if just that starting point, just that little bit more information, allowed them to have the confidence to just get on with it themselves and try out prompts that were relevant to their course and what they needed to study, which was a positive. And also came through about fears to use generative AI. So I guess it's not unexpected that academic misconduct was the biggest fear that came through about using generative AI at university. And students expressed quite a lot of concerns about understanding the guidance on what was allowed and what wasn't allowed. And just being really worried that they would unintentionally get in trouble for using it. So obviously there's a lot of narrative around students cheating with using generative AI, but it seems like there's also a lot on the other side too, where students are almost overly concerned about using it sometimes, which means that they're kind of steering totally away from it, where potentially, as coming through some of the results that I've come up with, it could be a real benefit, particularly to disabled students. So they might be missing out on something which is really beneficial to support them in their study. And also hallucinations, which is just where the GenAI tool is inaccurate. That came through as the most common concern about its use for revision, which is also quite understandable. So obviously I tried to, in the training, give them more guidance on how to write essentially better prompts to help reduce the chance of hallucinations. So we know that we can't totally eliminate that risk. So it's an understandable concern. That came through in the training. And just some kind of anecdotal stuff that students were saying about that they have been encouraged to stay away from generative AI, but they're now seeing the benefits of using it as a learning tool. And another student saying about that they never use it in assignments, that they're worried about getting in trouble, even for things like using it for revision or summarizing notes. which is, like I said, the academic misconduct fears that some students have it. So that was the findings that came through from that part of the project, and like, I finished my MSc like at the start of this year, and obviously like I was doing that while working here at the university. So I wanted to then use the kind of work I'd done to then continue to like deliver further training sessions, which is what I did in March of this year. I just ran the same series again. The differences being that I added additional study skills into that. So I also covered using it for proofreading, using it for supporting with reading, that kind of thing. I covered a further discussion of ethical concerns about generative AI. So additionally covered some of the kind of bias that can exist within these tools and some environmental concerns. And I covered Google Notebook LM, which was mentioned earlier in this session. I showed students that and how that could potentially be used to support them with reading and research. And this was not part of my studies whatsoever, just part of my job role, but I did ask students to complete a feedback form after attending the training session, just because it's useful to have additional data on like how they found these tools. And so I got quite nice quotes from this actually, which kind of helped to kind of almost bulk up, I guess, the more statistical stuff that I got from the earlier series of training sessions that I delivered. So some nice quotes came through here, but I asked students about how does GenAI support the things they find difficult due to their disability. And there's a wide range of stuff here coming through about using Notebook LM to support with reducing screen time and being able to stretch while studying. Mention a student with back pain and sitting for long periods is difficult, so GenAI can help them be more efficient and effective in their studies. Comment about student finding it difficult to motivate themselves and stay focused. So GenAI can help them to break down complex topics and make it more fun to study. Mention about reading large pieces can be difficult due to fatigue and brain fog and sitting for a long time. So GenAI can help them to interact with reading sources a little bit better. And the last point about hearing loss and sometimes missing useful information in a lecture. So AI can help them to summarize topics or elaborate on topics so that they can to support their vision or understanding of what is covered. So that was the first question I asked within the form. The second question I asked was so if I initially asked, do they agree or disagree with the statement that GenAI is a useful tool for students with disabilities? And those that said agree, these were some of the responses that came through. So mentioned that it can help with speeding up tasks that take longer for students with disabilities, which is a common thing for students with disabilities. They find that studying takes longer often, so it's important to find ways that make it easier. Someone saying that GenAI can be, if used correctly, can be great for students with disabilities to ease anxiety and study stress. That it can be helpful for students of different types of learners to understand concepts in a simpler, fun way. The fact that it can be useful for students with hearing difficulties, they can ask AI to confirm details about a topic that they might have misheard, elaborate on things more. And also that it can help out to draw out key points from difficult to process academic language or long documents and explain concepts to make them more easy to understand. And yeah, so that was some of the nice quotes that came through to get a bit of a better understanding of what our students are thinking about this technology. So kind of to conclude, these are some of the conclusions that I guess I drew from this. This is not necessarily exactly what came through from the research, but from the whole experience of delivering this over the academic year, it was really interesting. The students were really keen to learn. They were grateful for the opportunity to attend. They had lots of interesting perspectives. It was mainly delivered by me, kind of top down, but still students like wanted to ask lots of questions. Some of them just wanted to have a space to kind of discuss their perspectives on this technology. And like there was a lot of interest in this, which I didn't say earlier, that there was lots of students. There was 29 students attended in the first series and 30 in the second series, and there were a lot more that were interested in attending, which didn't actually materialize in coming along. So it was great to have such high attendance at something like this. So that was a real positive, really interesting insight. It was obviously good to see the impact of the training on students' confidence in using GenAI and their likelihood to use it in the future. It came through, as I mentioned previously, the awareness and interpretation of the university's AI guidance, difficulty with understanding what's allowed and what isn't. There seems to be a lot of grey area. Obviously, it's difficult to regulate this in a university setting. Students still been unclear about, well, if I write something myself and then GenAI rewrites it, is that okay to use in an essay? Can I cite its use? And this type of thing can be complicated. And also students still concerned about using it for revision, for brainstorming ideas. But do the idea need to be my own, or can I ask GenAI to come up with the original stuff as long as I write it out and explain it, and that's my own words. So I wasn't able to provide particularly clear-cut guidance on that. But I did my best to interpret the university's guidance and also steer them to please check with your school in what is permitted within the course that you study, because some academic schools were interpreting the policies slightly different. And also, interestingly, the fears that came through about using generative AI was interesting to see that the students were pretty fearful, to be honest, about using generative AI at university. So it's interesting to see that that side of things, which is perhaps not as publicised. So just to finish off, hoping to progress and do more of this next academic year that's just about to start. We're planning a new series of these sessions. We need to do a bit more work to update them before we get started, because this is constantly changing. But plan is to deliver further sessions on this in the next academic year in a fairly similar format, and get some more feedback and see what's working and what isn't, and how we can change it to make it more effective for the students that are there. And yeah, we're keeping it open to students, any student at a university who self-declares as disabled. I mean, to be honest, it could be relevant for any students, but that's our job. Like, I work in disability services, and yeah, so we're focusing on that cohort also, because knowing that there might have particular challenges to studying, so this can help to give them that kind of more equity with their peers, I guess. So yeah, I've included my references within the PowerPoint if anyone wants to check things out for themselves. And that's the end of the kind of prepared presentation. Thanks for coming on.